How many times can Russia keep on raising an army to replace its dead? It's a question that Ukraine has asked many times before, as the seemingly relentless grind of Russian soldiers being sent to their doom against Ukraine's defenses appears to have no end. But that end is coming. There is now a light at the end of the tunnel as Vladimir Putin's manpower crisis explodes. Stretched to the breaking point by historic troop losses, Russia is finally struggling to replace its dead. And that claim comes from no less than Secretary General of NATO Mark Rutte. According to Rutte, Russia's massive monthly losses, which he claims reach up to 25,000 soldiers, and maybe higher as you'll soon learn, are unsustainable. The Russians at the moment are losing massive amounts of their soldiers thanks to the Ukrainian defense, Business Insider reported Rutte as saying during the Global Europe Conference in Brussels. The outlet's report, which was published on January 14th, went on to note that Rutte clarified his statement with the revelation that the exceptionally high numbers he shared weren't Russia's casualty rate, they were the country's death rate. "I'm not talking seriously wounded, killed," Rutte declared, adding, "Now they lose this amount or more in 1 month, so that's also unsustainable on their side." It's a remarkable claim for Rutte to make, especially as Russia has managed to prove that Putin's sole tactic of throwing soldiers at the Ukrainian problem until that problem goes away was sustainable, at least up until this point. Every time it seemed that Russia was on the verge of losing too many soldiers, another trick would be pulled from the Russian sleeve. Russia is still trying to play its tricks, and we'll explore what some of them are soon, but the difference is that the recruiting tactics that have worked so well for almost 4 years are starting to fall. What Russia is left with are monthly losses that exceed the total losses that the former Soviet Union suffered during its entire war with Afghanistan. That war saw the Soviet Union lose an estimated 15,000 of its soldiers during a little more than 9 years. That amounts to about 1,666 soldiers annually, or about 138 soldiers per month. Even if NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte's lower-end estimate of 20,000 Russian deaths per month is accurate, that would mean that Russia is now losing roughly 5,000 more soldiers per month in Ukraine than it did over 9 years of war in Afghanistan. At this point, there's a case to be made that Putin is a mass murderer of his own people, and the craziest thing is that Rutte's figures may be an underestimate. On January 8th, both Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and the Commander-in-Chief of Ukraine's Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrskyi, revealed that Rutte's monthly kill estimate may be off to the tune of several thousand. Al Jazeera reports Zelensky is claiming that the number of Russian deaths has exceeded 25,000 every month since October. In December, 35,000 occupiers were eliminated, and this has been confirmed with video footage, Zelensky claimed, adding, "In November, there were 30,000, and in October, 26,000 eliminated occupiers." Not only are all of these numbers higher than Russia's estimate, there's also a clear pattern at play. Russia's death count rose by between 4,000 and 5,000 soldiers per month during the final 3 months of 2025, according to Zelensky. That pattern doesn't bode well for Putin's 2026 plans, and Syrskyi confirmed that the numbers that Zelensky shared are mostly accurate. Also on January 8th, Al Jazeera reported the Ukrainian military's commander-in-chief as stating, "The enemy lost over 33,000 personnel in December. This figure includes only confirmed video cases, but the actual losses of the occupiers are greater." Syrskyi then went on to share another interesting nugget of information, adding, "The first month when the unmanned systems units of the Ukrainian Defense Forces neutralized approximately as many servicemen of the occupying army as Russia conscripted in a month." There are hints in this statement that Russia isn't recruiting as well as it needs to recruit, and that Ukraine's drones are doing most of the damage to the Russian military as we head into 2026. Keep watching to discover that there's a lot more than a handful of hints happening here. But right now, something might be bugging you. It's one thing for Ukraine to claim that it's killed anywhere between 20,000 and 35,000 Russian soldiers per month, but claims don't mean much of anything. You could claim to be king of the world, and it wouldn't mean much if you didn't have the crown, scepter, robe, and fancy patter to prove it. Evidence is more important than numbers, and Ukraine needs it if it's going to substantiate any of these claims. Ukraine has that evidence, and it's on a platform that is accessible to Ukrainian military personnel. That platform is called the Delta System, and it's somewhat similar to a Discord server that's made available to Ukraine's armed forces. Via the Delta System, Ukrainian soldiers can look at battle maps and, crucially, see the live feeds being recorded by the drones that Ukraine is using to attack Russia's troops. The system, which was created in 2021, offers Ukraine a form of situational awareness on its territory that Russia can't match, and it can be accessed anywhere. As Grey Dynamics points out, the Delta system does not require specific settings and is ready to use on laptops, tablets, or mobile phones. Its user-friendly design shows images collected from drones, satellites, human intelligence sources, and sensors. All of this information can be accessed via an interactive map, making Delta the ideal source for Ukraine to use when it wants to confirm the number of kills that it scores against Russia. Granted, the average person can't simply jump onto Delta to see what it shows Ukraine, but the footage of Ukraine's drones kills is there, and it can be verified by any Ukrainian soldier who cares to view it. Should those soldiers care to look, they will discover that there is one massive difference maker that has led to Ukraine killing so many of Russia's soldiers during the last few months. It's a difference maker that has existed for several years at this point, though Ukraine's use of it seems to have leveled up. Of course, we're talking about drones. And what we're seeing now is that Ukraine's drones alone are killing more soldiers than Putin can bring into the Russian military. The December figures that Siersky shared serve as the turning point on Russia's recruitment front, and it's all due to Ukraine's drones. Euromaidan Press shared some interesting statistics in a January 6th article, where it highlighted just how vital Ukraine's drones have become to everything that it does now. In December alone, units operating Ukraine's unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, carried out 339,000 missions. It's an insane number that breaks down to about 10,935 missions daily. What was likely a sharp uptick in drone operations clearly bore fruit. As Siersky claims, per Euromaidan Press, the number of targets that Ukraine hit with its drones rose by 31% in December, with the number of Russian soldiers hit by UAVs rising by more than 25%. However, these crazy numbers aren't even the most impressive part of this portion of the story. Ukraine's unmanned systems forces comprise just 2.2% of all Ukraine's military personnel. To offer some perspective on that percentage, Global Firepower says that Ukraine's military has 900,000 active personnel. 2.2% of 900,000 is just 19,800 people. Now think back to the figures that Rutte, Zelensky and Siersky have shared. Ukraine's drone operators are killing more Russian soldiers each month than the total number of drone operators Ukraine has, every single month. If a military wants efficiency, Ukraine is showcasing exactly where that efficiency comes from. Naturally, Ukraine isn't going to let up on the drone front. It's building more and better drones that will allow its operators to increase their kill counts as they bleed the Russian military dry in the process. On the numbers front, Ukraine is building about 4 million drones annually, per a November 12th report by the Kyiv Post. Not all of these drones are being used to kill Russia's soldiers, at least not directly. Ukraine also builds reconnaissance UAVs that allows its troops both behind the drone controls and on the ground to react to Russia's movements. Again, the Delta system comes into play here. Ukraine is also building thousands of long-range drones, which it's using to slowly erode the Russian war machine from the inside with strikes on Russian energy, logistics and equipment. Not direct kills perhaps, but the less that Russia has to give to its soldiers, the more likely those soldiers are to die on the Ukrainian battlefield. Still, the vast majority of the 4 million per year are FPV drones, like those recording the kills that Rutte, Zelensky and Siersky have highlighted. Those drones are only going to get better with time. On January 14th, Euromaidan Press reported on a meeting between Ukraine's top military and security leaders. During that meeting, a decision was made to increase the effectiveness of Ukraine's drone line, which is the drone-infested kill zone that runs between 10 and 15 kilometers or 6.2 and 9.3 miles deep across the entire front line. Ukraine's former Minister of Defense Rustem Amirov commented on the meeting in a Telegram post where he said, "The Ministry of Defense is instructed to streamline and ensure a clear distribution of funds between means of destruction, as well as find additional financial opportunities to cover the urgent needs of the defense forces. They also focused on scaling up the production of fiber optic drones, taking into account the range and accuracy of destruction." Drones have already proven themselves to be very effective killers of Russia's soldiers. Now Ukraine appears ready to make more, to make those drones more capable, and that means what we've seen in recent months regarding Russia's death rate may just be the start of a much bigger problem that's going to plague Putin and his cronies in 2026 and beyond, should the war not end this year. Still, Russia has solved this type of problem before. How? More and more recruitment. And if you remember what we told you earlier in the video about Russia's military recruitment, then you can probably guess what we're going to say next. Putin's time-tested solution isn't working as well as he needs it to anymore. There are a few reasons why. But before we tell you what they are, we hope that you're enjoying this video. If you are, we'd appreciate it if you like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment telling us what you think about everything we've told you so far. It all helps the channel, and your support means we can keep bringing you insight into military matters all over the world. Back to Russia's recruitment. Putin has been able to rely on a pretty simple strategy for much of the Ukraine war. All that the Kremlin has to do is find some of the poorest regions in Russia, locate socially vulnerable men, and then flash more cash than those men have ever seen in their lives in front of them. Just like that, Russia has contract soldiers, which has been hiring by the tens of thousands every month. The Kremlin specifically targets the Russians who have no future prospects, and it does so by advertising in places where those types of people are more likely to be, as Politico reported back in May 2025. Where Putin once used summons and subpoenas to push people into Russia's military, he was now using huge amounts of money, attractive benefits packages, and even appeals to the fragile manhood of the men that Russia targeted to get what he wanted. Russia created what amounted to a military marketplace, and according to Ekaterina Schulman, who is a political scientist at the Osteuropa Institute in Germany, the marketplace was focused on the very specific demographics. These measures target a specific demographic: socially vulnerable men, men with debts, criminal records, little financial literacy, or those trapped by predatory microcredit, people on the margins with no prospects, Schulman tells Politico. And it all worked out well for a while. But now Russia is starting to see some strange things happen with its recruitment efforts. It all started in some of the examples of poorer regions of Russia that have been a wellspring of new soldiers for Putin for much of the war. In October, the Kyiv Post reported on the state of Russia's recruitment efforts in the Republic of Sakha, which is also known as Yakutia. There, recruitment centers have been falling short of their quotas by about 40%. Putin's ridiculous quotas likely played a role. However, discontent among the residents, particularly the indigenous Yakuts, Evans, and Evenki ethnic groups from which Russia had drawn so many times before, was also rife. These ethnic minorities don't want to die in Putin's war, and Russia is struggling to offer the financial incentives it needs to convince the types of people that it's been recruiting up until now to join. It's almost as though treating your soldiers like cannon fodder isn't the best approach. It's an approach that is biting Putin on the rear in a remarkable way, so keep watching to find out how. On the money front, Putin's entire strategy of using Russia's massive attrition rate to break Ukraine down is one that relies on a pretty massive recruitment budget. Indeed, IntelliNews reports that Russian military recruitment bonuses cost the Kremlin about $4 billion during the first half of 2025 alone. And that's a point in itself. This is money that Russia spent on bonuses alone. By the end of 2025, IntelliNews claimed Russia would have likely spent about $10 billion on bonuses, without considering wages, training costs, and equipping its soldiers. Never mind Russia's death rate, this kind of spending isn't sustainable, and the cracks are starting to show. In October, the Jamestown Foundation reported that many of Russia's federal subjects are quietly reducing the size of the bonuses that they're offering to recruits. Those federal subjects, such as the Republic of Sakha that we mentioned earlier, seem to have gotten this crazy idea that spending their money on essential services such as schools and hospitals is probably better than giving it to the people who are just going to get sent to Ukraine to die. What this all amounts to is that the Russian recruitment budget is running low. And now the Kremlin is getting more desperate. It has started using covert tactics to recruit more foreign soldiers as it tries to fill the gaps left by some of its regions failing to hit their recruitment quotas. Social media campaigns promising what sounds like easy work away from the Ukraine war's front lines are being used to entice people from other countries to sign up for Putin's war. Of course, these promised non-combat roles end up turning into the foreign recruits being sent into the meat grinder. According to ABC News, Russia has recruited at least 18,000 foreign soldiers from 128 countries since the war began. 3,388 of those soldiers have died in a war that most were told they wouldn't have to fight as of December 7th. On January 13th, The Guardian reported on the case of Yemeni men falling for Putin's deception and the effect that ending up on the Ukraine war's front lines is having on them. The outlet shares a quote from one unnamed soldier from Yemen who filmed himself saying, "We die 1,000 times a day from the terror we endure at the hands of the Russians. Save your Yemeni brothers. We are being forced to fight. Our friends are dead. We are trapped between life and death." Beyond being a brutal commentary on the war that Putin has created, this statement is a warning. Russia is trying to deceive foreign soldiers into fighting Putin's war. The more information like this gets out, the less that Russia will be able to rely on people from other nations to plug the gaps caused by its domestic recruitment failures. What we are now seeing from all this is a Russian military that is on the cusp of a manpower crisis. And that crisis is leading to the painful bite to Putin's rear that we mentioned earlier in the video. Russia's cannon fodder tactics aren't only unsustainable because of the number of its soldiers being killed by Ukraine's drones, or its increasing desperation to recruit by any means possible as more people refuse to fight for Putin. In Ukraine itself, Russian officers are doing something that the Kremlin never thought they would do: rebelling against Russia's cannon fodder tactics. The Daily Express reports that military personnel in the Donetsk region of Ukraine, and especially those destined to assault the embattled city of Pokrovsk, are increasingly appealing to be moved anywhere else. These claims come from the pro-Ukrainian partisan group Atesh, which says that officers are practically begging their superiors to send them to the rear because they don't want to die in Pokrovsk. The command is keeping officers in check with threats of disciplinary penalties, demotions, and complete career blocking, Atesh claims before adding, "Officers are harshly reprimanded for the surrender of positions by their subordinates, are required to report on a stable situation that does not actually exist, and are forced to sign documents that are far from reality." Fear is at an all-time high among Russia's soldiers, and that is as dangerous to Putin's ambition of capturing Ukraine as Russia's recruitment issues. And it gets worse. So terrified are many of Russia's officers, and even some of its commanders, that they're doing things to themselves that actively contribute to the massive Russian death rate that is causing Russia's manpower problems in the first place. Those officers and commanders are drinking heavily. On December 24th, United 24 media reported on what Artesh calls Russia's Alko Battalion. An Artesh agent embedded with the 4th Battalion of Russia's 74th Motorized Rifle Brigade says that the company's commanders drink heavily when stationed on the front lines, to the point where they deliver their orders to regular soldiers while being so under the influence that they are utterly detached from the reality of what's happening on the ground. The impact of this unique approach to modern warfare is about what you would expect. Casualties in the Alko Battalion amount to up to 100 killed and wounded per month, significantly more than other units, the Artesh agent says. But no matter how these commanders try to drown their sorrows as their officers beg to be reassigned, the Kremlin continues to order assaults. Russia's soldiers run in fear toward Ukraine's defenses. Most never make it close, as they're mowed down by drones in their thousands. As we enter 2026, Russia is discovering that manpower isn't unlimited, nor is money. A crisis of Putin's own making is upon him, and there is no way back for Russia from here. All that Russia has left is attempts at escalation without a true ending in sight. That isn't going to work either, as leaning more into a strategy that clearly isn't working is no solution to Russia's manpower crisis. Putin's end game has begun, so grab some popcorn and watch our video as we document a Russian collapse that is unfolding live in Ukraine. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more updates on the impact that Putin's attritional strategy is having on a deteriorating Russian army. And thank you for watching.